this even on?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you have to speak up.
All right. So we are now entering into the Midbar, which is the book of Numbers, and just want to make an opening comment about the book of Numbers with regards to this census. You'll notice that we recounted all the numbers for the men 20 years of age and up that are able to go to war. And the number that, when you add all of the 12 tribes together, the number you come up with is 603,550, which is interesting because, go with me to Exodus chapter, Exodus chapter 38. Exodus chapter 38. And cross-reference this Exodus 38 with Numbers chapter 1, because 7 months earlier, if you look at chapter 38, 7 months earlier, if you go to verse 26, they do a census there as well, and it says, for each man that is a half shekel according to the shekel of the sanctuary, for everyone included in the numbering from 20 years old and above, for 603,550. So 7 months earlier, we had the same number. So we're not losing anybody. It's fascinating how, as time progresses, there's still not any diminishment of the numbers. Even though the numbers of the tribes may change, the total number doesn't change. It's God's way of saying, I'm keeping my faithfulness to the progeny and to the covenant, in that even though you're going to, and this is the key by the end of the book, even though you're going to die in the wilderness, we're going to end up with almost the same numbers. It's going to be very, very close. So that the fertility rate is keeping up with the rate of death all the way through the book. So even though he says this first generation will die in the wilderness, all of those from 20 years of age and up will die because of their lack of faith. As they go through the wilderness, the fertility rate keeps up with the death rate, so that they hardly, by the end of it, there's only a couple hundred people different from the one to the other, which is fascinating. It's a way of God saying, look, I'm being faithful to the covenant. Even though you're dying off, birth rates are keeping up with death rates. All right, I want to go back to something earlier in our earlier discussion just for a moment, because this is to, I wish Jimmy was in here, because this goes to his question with regards to the text in Revelation chapter 6. Reading from the ESV, this is the text he quoted. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar, now our text says the souls. I would argue that it's the lives, the people, of those that had been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne. I don't think there were souls there, because it's hard to see a soul, even in a vision. So my argument still stands that on the when we're looking at whether it's the word nefesh or suke, it's a human being, it's a person, somebody you can physically, tangibly see and touch. And unfortunately, we've had the translations that are saying everywhere nefesh shows up and everywhere suke shows up in Greek saying soul, soul, soul. And it's like, no, it's life, it's a person, it's a body, it's something you can touch. All right. I think that's important because it gets us off on a tangent when we start talking about all this other stuff. So, nefesh, in 99% of its usages in the Hebrew Scripture, means a life, a body, something that's breathing and that is actively breathing. When the body goes in the ground, we don't talk about you anymore, in essence of you're moving around, because all we see is this body. And what has gone out of the body? Air that oxygenates. Respiration. This is nefesh. By the way, the word nefesh can also be metaphorically used to speak of the throat. Why the throat? Because that's where air comes in. The Hebrew people thought in terms of respiration. And when you stopped breathing, you no longer existed. Your breath or the ruach, the wind in your lungs, goes back to God who gave it. It's not as if we have bought into this Greek notion that there are disembodied, the body goes to the ground and that something up here hovers afterward, somewhere. By the way, go back and look at Genesis chapter 5. Here's a common thought. Here's a common thinking within traditional interpretations. There's two people, according to the Bible, that went to heaven. We just looked at one, Elijah. But did Elijah go to heaven? No, not really. And go back and look at Enoch. Everybody says Enoch went to heaven. Only problem is when you go back and look at Genesis 5, it doesn't say that Enoch went to heaven. It says this, Enoch was no more, for God took him. And everybody reads into that, God took him to heaven. It doesn't say that. Go back and read it. Yes?
Enoch, like Paul, was taken there and brought back. Paul went to the third heaven. Enoch was shown the fifth heaven.
Yeah, but you're going to have to go to intertestamental literature to get that thought processes. They're not going to get that from the text itself, from the immediate text that we have in Genesis. Just, by the way, so the phrase "he was not," that phrase "he was not" is used twice elsewhere in Genesis to speak of Joseph. When his brothers speak to Joseph, they say, "We are 11 brothers of one man, and our 12th brother is no more. He's missing and presumed dead." So twice in Genesis, this same phraseology is used just to mean missing and presumed dead. We don't know what happened to him. What happened to Enoch? We don't know. The text doesn't say. Now we get to intertestamental literature, and what Bill says comes into play. That you have this fifth heaven and fifth dimension. This is your intertestamental literature giving us this material. Huh?
I thought there were only 3.
Oh, there's more dimensions. No, they talk about more dimensions than 3. So it's interesting. All right, now, all that to say, this coming Wednesday is, from Tuesday night to Wednesday night, is Shabbot. And the traditional book that we study for Shabbot is the book of Ruth. So take your handout that was passed out to you, handed out to you, and we're going to look at some background texts.
I tore my hand out.
Oh, sure. We're going to look at some texts that are background information that we need if we're going to approach the book of Ruth, because this book, like every book of the Bible, when we come to any book of the Bible, including Genesis, by the way, no matter what book of the Bible you come to, when you come to it, it supposes that you have already read the whole corpus, that you've read everything that's in it, that's informing it, certainly everything that came before it, but that you've read the text so that you know what's going on. There's background things in their culture, in their way of thinking, that it expects you to already kind of have in mind. Let me give you an example of this kind of when I say culture, we've seen this in the book, for instance, of Jonah. You won't even catch this in English because English really doesn't try to pull this over. In the book of Jonah, I mentioned this when we studied the book of Jonah and Yom Kippur, how that you have this great fish, this big fish, Gadol Hadad. That this big fish changes genders in the book. It goes from being a male fish to a female fish and back to a male fish. You can't even see that in English because it doesn't try to delineate that. But there's a mindset here. There's a mindset when you're reading this in Hebrew that says, when Jonah's not in this fish, it's a male. When Jonah's inside the fish, it's a female. And when the fish spits Jonah out, it's a male again. And it's not that the fish changed genders. It's simply the fact that from their perspective, as they're thinking in their culture, there's no way a male can have a human being living inside of them. The only gender that can have a female, a male living inside, a female or a male living inside of them is a female. It's just the way they're thinking. So it has to change because Jonah's inside them. That's the cultural way of thinking. But you can't even see that. And I'm saying there's thousands of these cultural implications that come through, and many of them are biblically based. That's what we're going to look at today with regards to the book of Ruth. Yes?
And interestingly enough, if we did have that in the English, then there would be all sorts of weird theologies that
Oh, my
branched
word.
off of that.
Oh, believe me.
Yeah.
There already is. Oh, yeah.
Boy.
The whole gender thing. This fish is transgender. No, the fish isn't transgender. The fish is simply changing grammatically.
Right.
It has to change grammatically because of the way they're thinking.
Its function has momentarily changed.
Yeah, its function has momentarily changed, and now it's this male fish is carrying a human being, which, as we know, and as you're thinking, as we know, the only gender that can carry another person inside of them is a female. Therefore, grammatically, we have to change this because that's what makes sense. But that's how your culture thinks. Our culture will just leave it the same. We wouldn't even try to change that. And then notice how it goes back. As soon as he's expelled, he's spit out or vomited out, what happens? Oh, no, the thing goes back to male again. That's the only thing that explains why they went this direction in the grammar. Because they're thinking in terms of how the culture would view things. All right, now, the book of Ruth opens saying that the judges, this happens in the time period of the judges. Go with me to Judges chapter 2. Joshua, Judges chapter 2. Judges chapter 2 and verse 11. This will give us a taste of the book of Judges. It says this in verse 11. Then the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals. And they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt, and they followed other gods from among the gods of the people who were all around them, and they bowed down to them. And they provoked the Lord to anger. They forsook the Lord and served Baal and the Ashtaroths. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel. So he delivered them into the hand of plunderers who despoiled them, and he sold them into the hand of their enemies all around, so that they could no longer stand before their enemies. Wherever they went out, the hand of the Lord was against them for calamity, as the Lord had said, and as the Lord had sworn to them, and they were greatly distressed. Nevertheless, the Lord raised up Shoftim, which is the judges, they're really warriors, who delivered them out of the hand of those who plundered them. Yet they would not listen to their judges, but they played the harlot with other gods and bowed down to them. They turned quickly from the way in which their fathers walked in obeying the commandments of the Lord. They did not do so. And when the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge and delivered them out of the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For the Lord was moved to pity by their groaning because of those who oppressed them and harassed them. And it came to pass when the judge was dead that they reverted and behaved more corruptly than their fathers, by following other gods to serve them and bow down to them. They did not cease from their own doings, nor from their stubborn way. Then the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he said, because this nation has transgressed my covenant, which I commanded their fathers, and has not heeded my voice, I also will no longer drive out before them any of the nations which Joshua left when he died, so that through them I may test Israel, whether they will keep the ways of the Lord, to walk in them as their fathers kept them or not. Therefore the Lord left those nations without driving them out immediately, nor did he deliver them into the hand of Joshua. In other words, all right, you guys want to serve other gods? And it's this cycle of apostasy, and I put it in letter R. You'd have a relapse, then there would be ruin, then they would repent, and then there would be rest for a while when God raised up a judge. But we're saying a judge is really a warrior. Most of them are warriors that fight on Israel's behalf to deliver Israel out of the hands of their enemies. And this cycle happens over and over again throughout the book. And I would argue that when you get to the end of the book of Judges, It is what I personally believe the worst story in all of Israel's history. By the time you're reading the last chapters of Judges, it reminds you, there's a lot of echoes, tons of echoes, of Sodom and Gomorrah. So you're supposed to read the last chapters of Judges side by side with the Sodom and Gomorrah narratives. There's this overlap. What absolutely blows the mind, here's how bad it has gotten. One whole tribe, Benjamin, is almost wiped out. One whole tribe is almost gone, killed. And this man does the unthinkable. He cuts up his wife into 12 pieces and sends a piece of her to every tribe, which was a call to battle. Now, Saul does the same thing a little bit later on in the monarchy, but he cuts up an animal. He cuts up a donkey. I can live with that. He cuts up a donkey and he sends 12 pieces of this donkey out as a way of saying, to those who don't come to the battle, this is a call to battle. To those of you who don't come, the same thing will happen to you if you don't come. Okay. This man actually hacks up his concubine, his wife, sends out the 12 pieces. And this thing is just, about the time you think it can't get any worse, it does. Yeah.
And before that, he makes her go out and be attacked by all these people.
Absolutely. Yeah, she's raped all night.
I mean, the whole thing is.
The whole thing is
horrible.
just twisted and perverse. Like I said, it's the worst, in my estimation, it is about the worst narrative that you have as far as perversity and corruption and just evil, absolute evil. To say to somebody, to say to a culture, here's my wife, rape her all night if that's what you want, if that helps satisfy your desires. And then he puts her on his donkey, and then he cuts her up into 12 pieces later on. It's just, the whole thing is brutal. And they, like I said, they almost wipe out a whole tribe. They almost wipe out the whole tribe of Benjamin over this. Benjamin barely survives. All right, so this is the background, this is the moral background to the book of Ruth. So the thing about Ruth is this, and this is a point for you and I to take away from this. In utter darkness, anybody who will stand up and be a light will be extremely bright. I mean, if this room was pitch dark, as dark as we could get it, and you had just a little candle, it would seem like a beam, because it would be the one focal point that you could see. So in a dark and perverse world, anybody that just stands up and is a light is going to shine extremely bright.
That's what you said about the light. In the dark night, a lit match can be seen a mile away.
Oh, absolutely.
But going back to what we were talking about, Israel, those things were recorded for our benefit today. And as you look at history, for those who choose to live ungodly, the same thing will happen to them.
Yeah, eventually there's judgment.
Our nation, right after World War I, the Roaring 20s, right after World War II, the promiscuous 60s. Look where we are today. What's coming next?
Oof. Yeah, we're living in...
We're living on the very, very thin edge of judgment.
Absolutely.
Severe judgment.
Absolutely. I mean, it's now happening. We just had Manchester with Aria Grande. We had 24 Coptic Christians killed in Egypt this week. A bus bombed just because they're Christians.
48 Christians killed on the island of Mindanao.
Yeah, so we're seeing hot spots around the world where more and more violence, more and more hatred. It's only going to increase. It's only going to increase. And America, here's my thinking. It's just my words. I think we are naive to think it's not coming here again.
It's haughty.
It's coming here again. It's just a matter of time. But you know what? I look at it this way. God is faithful. God will be faithful to those that walk in his ways. and that seek him. And I also look at it this way. The only thing they can take from me is my body. They cannot take from me that which God can resurrect. Yeah.
As we were talking this morning, we are in a perilous time. They're going to get worse and worse and worse. The best place for you and me and everybody in here is to be in a fall. The favor of God.
Favor of God, yes. And by the way, let me describe this time period of the judges. It reads like our newspaper with regards to what's going on. So here's the mantra. Here, if there was a mantra for the period of the judges, it's also a mantra for our day. Look at with me. This phrase is used 4 times in the book of Judges. Look at Judges chapter 17, verse 6. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. If there was a phrase that describes our culture, it's this. Everyone does what is right in his own eyes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Nobody is looking to God and saying, what does God say is right and wrong? Here's the new mantra. Well, that's your truth.
Yes, I hate that one.
That's your truth. If that's what you believe, then that's your truth.
Truth is not subjective.
But that's your truth. My truth is this. Your truth is that. And nobody is saying that here is what is truth. That what God speaks is truth.
Like Luke wrote to us, I think in chapter 8, the people said, we will not have that man rule over us.
Yes.
This is what we're saying today collectively as a nation.
Right. And the other part of that is, in those days there was no king in Israel. If there is no king, and here I'm speaking of King Yeshua, the Messiah, if there is no king, then you will have everybody doing what is right in their own eyes. So either you have a king who gives you commandments and tells you what is truth, or everybody does that which is right in his own eyes. It's either or. Either you say, I will do what the king has commanded, and what the king says is true or not true, that is truth, or everybody will be truth unto themselves. I got to show you guys. I'm going to show you guys this video. It's a 4-minute clip, not today. I'm going to show you this. It absolutely shows you where we are. This was done on the UW campus. It was an interview of students there on the UW campus, and this man he's 5'11", white, male,
I'm Chinese.
and he goes up to students at the UW campus and he says, I'm feeling like he's interviewing them. He says, I feel like I'm a female today. Is that okay with you? And they say, yeah, it's fine. If you want to be a female today, that's fine. And he says to them, I'm also feeling like today that like I'm Chinese. And they go, well, if you feel like you're Chinese, then you're Chinese. And he says to them, I also feel like I'm 6'5". I'm 6'5". Is that okay with you? And they all go, all these people, yeah, 6'5" is fine. And he says to them, as you watch this video, nobody will tell him that he's a 5'11" white male. They are willing to tell him that you're a 6'5" Chinese woman, if that's what you want to believe. If that's your truth, then so be it. Because we have come to the place where every man does that which is right in his own eyes. And when that happens, you have anarchy.
Didn't there used to be a time when you go to a philosophy class and they would talk about your transcendental truths, the things that, like love and what it is and how that it's a transcendental truth that it is and it always will be and it transcends who you are and what you are, and now they have taken that and turned it on its head and decided that there aren't those things anymore. And now we're supposed to believe the total anarchy and
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like.
Every man's a truth to
140
himself.
pounds and
It's- All right, go with me to Genesis 19.
7 foot tall.
Because in Genesis 19,
Yes.
this is where we find out about the Moabites. Because Ruth is a Moabite. So Genesis chapter 19, look at verse 30. Genesis chapter 19, verse 30. So then Lot went up to Zoar and dwelt in the mountains, verse 30, chapter 19 of Genesis, and his 2 daughters were with him. For he was afraid to dwell in Zoar. He and his 2 daughters dwelt in a cave. Now the firstborn said to the younger, Our father is old, and there is no man on the earth to come into us, as the custom of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve the lineage of our father. So they made their father drink wine that night. And the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. It happened on the next day that the firstborn said to the younger, Indeed, I lay with my father last night. Let us make him drink wine tonight also, and you go in and lie with him, that we may preserve the lineage of our father. Then they made their father drink wine that night also, and the younger arose and lay with him, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Which, by the way, is just absolutely insane. Verse 36. Thus both the daughters of Lot were with child by their father. The firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. And by the way, Moab, from his father. So Moab means from his father. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. And the younger, she also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ami. He is the father of the people of Ammon to this day. Okay, Ammonites. So we have Moabites and Ammonites. And the Moabites live in what we now today call, and so do the Ammonites, Jordan. They're Jordanian.
Is there a place called Moab in the Middle East still?
Yes. So the Jordanians are actually biological descendants of Lot, who is the nephew of Abraham. There's a lot of relationship to this thing, interconnectedness. So Moab, from his father, the oldest daughter. So the Moabites go and live in what we now call Jordan. Okay? All right. Now look at Deuteronomy chapter 23. Deuteronomy chapter 23. This is all backstory because Ruth is a Moabite. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 23. And we're picking up our reading in verse 3. It says this, An Ammonite or a Moabite shall not enter the assembly of the Lord, even to the 10th generation. None of his descendants shall enter the assembly of the Lord forever, because they did not meet you with bread or water on the road when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired against you Balaam the son of Beor from Pethor of Mesopotamia to curse you. Nevertheless, your God would not listen to Balaam, but the Lord your God turned the curse into a blessing for you, because the Lord your God loves you. You shall not seek their peace, nor their prosperity, all your days forever. There it is. Okay. No Moabites or Ammonites in the assembly. These are bad people. We know that they're bad people. They started off bad. This started off from an incestuous relationship. These people then moved to what we now call Jordan, and these people were not good all the way through. They've been problematic all the way through. They didn't come out to meet you when you left Egypt. They tried to hire Balaam to curse you in Numbers chapters 22, 23, and 24. We'll get to in our reading here. So these people are not good people. They're just problematic. So don't admit them to the assembly.
Dysfunctional.
This thing started out dysfunctional, and it just became more dysfunctional. Yes, one and the two. Hold on. Go ahead.
Didn't Abraham and Sarah were the brother and sister and
Half.
half?
Yeah, they're half.
And Okay, so that still seems pretty messed up. I mean, it seems like the whole ancient families that we know of all came from messed up, half incestuous or completely incestuous relationships.
Many of them. Oh, hold on. We haven't even gotten to the emotional. So I left it off the notes, but go with me to Genesis 38. Genesis 38. Speaking of which, so Boaz is a Judahite. Go with me to Genesis 38. And verse 24. Well, let's pick up the 24, verse 24. Genesis 38, 24. I'll give you the short version. A man named Judah, who is he's the descendant of the Messiah. The line of the Messiah is going to come through Judah. Judah, in rapid succession, at the opening of chapter 38, has 3 sons. So he has the first 2 sons are married to the same woman. We have, if you go back to the beginning of 38, it's we have Onan, and Shelach. Onan, and Shelach. Okay, dies. So Tamar is given to Onan. Onan is problematic. I won't get into that. He dies. Then Shelach. Judah says, wait till Shelach grows up, and then I'll give Shelach to you as the 3rd son. And by the way, this giving of the daughter to the sons is called Yabun. Okay, we'll come back to that in just a moment. So, fast forward, Tamar sees that her father-in-law is not giving her to the 3rd son. So she dons the clothes of a harlot, has relations with her father-in-law, and she becomes pregnant with twins. Now we pick up the reading in verse 24. And it came to pass about 3 months after that Judah was told, saying, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the harlot. Furthermore, she is with child by harlotry. So Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. Nice guy. When she was brought out, she went to her father-in-law, saying, by the man to whom these belong, I am with child. She has his credit cards and his wallet. I mean,
Basically.
she pretty much has all of his identity. And she said, please determine whose these are, the signet and cord and staff. Well, it's all his. So Judah acknowledged them and said, she has been more righteous than I, because I did not give her to Shelach my son. And he never knew her again. Now it came to pass at the time for giving birth, that behold, twins were in her womb. And so it was when she was giving birth, that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it in his hand, saying, this one came out first. Then it happened as he drew back his hand, that his brother came out unexpectedly. And she said, how did you break through? This breach be upon you. So, therefore his name was called Peretz, the one who is the breacher. By the way, this word breacher becomes, later on in the prophets, a messianic term. He's the one who breaches. Afterward, his brother came out who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerach. So it's interesting, little Zerach sticks his hand out of the womb, and she ties a cord around it. And then Zerach says, pulls his hand back. Somehow they move around in the womb, and Peretz comes out. He's like, get out of the way. I'm coming out. He's the breacher. Right? That's Peretz. Then the next one to come out was the one she tied the cord around. That's Zerach. And Peretz is the descendant of Boaz. Peretz is in the line of Boaz. So now look at this dysfunctional family. I've got Ruth, who's from the Moabites, and I got Peretz, who's from this incestuous relationship with a daughter-in-law and her father-in-law. So this is a girl with her father and a girl with her father-in-law. And this is the Messianic line.
Yeah.
It's really, really warped.
Really dysfunctional.
It's really messy. But the beauty of it is that in all of this, God is working his kingship out of this. All right. Now go with me to Leviticus chapter. Actually, we're going to go to Deuteronomy 24. Go to Deuteronomy chapter 24. Deuteronomy chapter 24. Yes.
I have to wonder sometimes, if that's the line that he chose, then what would it have been like if he chose the other lines?
Yeah, we don't know.
I mean, if it's that messed up this way, how much more messed up might it have been the other ways?
Yeah, that's.
But God knows what's going to happen in the future and
Oh,
everything.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's
Time is irrelevant.
I think
it's one of those things that.
it wouldn't have been relevant because the whole point of it is we're all messed up. We all come from dysfunction. So it wouldn't matter who he chose, whether it would always be some type of dysfunction in whatever family.
Oh yeah,
he chose.
I mean, as you read through Genesis, every one of the patriarchs and the families are dysfunctional.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's see. Let's start out with Adam and Hava. Okay, I got Cain and Havel, and what does Cain do to Havel?
He'll kill them.
Kills him. Well, there you go. Brotherly love.
Yes.
If killing your brother isn't dysfunctional, I don't know what is. Then we have, if you move into the patriarchs, doesn't matter. You got Noah, I got Noah. So we think, well, we're going to start off with Noah.
He's a drunk.
Then you got Ham, Sham, and Japheth. Well, Ham decides that he's gonna mess things up, and Ham becomes the descendant. He becomes the predecessor for the Canaanites. He's messed up. So it doesn't matter. We still had sin on the boat. We didn't start all over with a new crew. We brought the sin on the boat with us. And you get Adam and Eve. You get Abraham and Sarah. Well, God delays in bringing a child, so take Hagar.
Yeah. Let's do it ourselves.
Do it ourselves. We'll do it ourselves.
I did it.
We also saw that stuff.
You got Isaac and Jacob. I mean, all right. And then Joseph. Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't you think if we was all righteous? We'd have probably said, look what we have done.
Mm-hmm.
But being all screwed up as we are, we have to confess that it was only the hand of God that brought us this far.
Right. And that's the whole point. Is this is God's hand that's doing all this. All right. Look at Deuteronomy 24, verse 19. This comes into play in the book of Ruth. It says this. Verse 19. When you reap your harvest in your field and you forget a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat your olive trees, you shall not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not glean it afterward. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I command you to do this thing. And this is just one reference. I give you a couple other references here. Bottom line is, when we get to the book of Ruth, Ruth is going to go glean in the fields of Boaz. But she's doing so based on what we find here in the Torah that says, if you're a widow or a foreigner, which she's both. So if you're a stranger, a widow, fatherless, then you can go and you can glean in the fields of Israel. Okay? Go to Leviticus chapter 25. Just back a few pages. Leviticus chapter 25. Leviticus chapter 25. And look at verse 23 and 24. Leviticus chapter 25, verses 23 and 24. It says this. And here's the key. It says, the land, speaking of Israel, the land shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine. That's the key. It all belongs to him. Israel it doesn't belong to Israel in the sense of it belongs to her permanently. It's hers by covenantal gift. But it's not ultimately, in the big scheme of things, the land belongs to God.
They're merely stewards.
They're his stewards. They're to keep that land for him, to sanctify it. Now look at what happens. And all the land of your possession, you shall grant redemption of the land. We can read on here. So you have what's called a goel. G-O-E-L. Goel. Redeemer. If I have to sell my land in order to get out of debt, there is the hope that one of my relatives, a goel, will purchase the land back for me at some point. If I have to go into debt slavery, there is the hope that a relative, a goel, will purchase my redemption, that will buy me back, pay my debt. Okay? That's the role of the goel. And look at go back in Deuteronomy, look at verse 5. Deuteronomy 25, look at verse 5. It says this. I want to go back to, Deuteronomy 25. Deuteronomy chapter 25. And look at verse 5. Deuteronomy 25, verse 5. If brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son. Here is Yabun. Now we saw it in Genesis 38, but here it's spelled out. If brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall go into her, take her as his wife, and perform the duties of a husband's brother to her. And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. But if the man does not want to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up a name to his brother in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of the city shall call him and speak to him. But if he stands firm and says, I do not want to take her, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandal from his foot, spit in his face, and answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house. And his name shall be called in Israel, quote, the house of him who had his sandal removed. There you go.
There you go.
And there you go. A very, very odd commandment. Very odd. So here it is. If brother A marries and this woman marries this woman here, and there's brother B. If A dies, B is supposed to marry the woman, the widow, and the first child they have, the first male child, is to be named and be a descendant of the one who died, because he died without a child. So that this family line does not die out. Yeah.
It says the brother who lives with his brother. Was that just a common practice, or is that a specific situation?
It wasn't unusual for them to live in very tight communities. So, like what we see in Genesis 38, it seems to me that they're all living in a compound type situation, so that they're very near each other. I think there was. They lived in very close proximity. If you go to the ancient cities in Israel today, you'll see that they were in very close proximity to each other. You didn't want to be an outlier, just for protection.
Yeah.
You die.
Yeah, go ahead.
Couldn't it also have something to do with the fact maybe that someone married hadn't left and leaves for his own household?
Yeah, in the instance of Genesis 38, the second son, which is Onan, he is not married. So now Onan, he refuses to have children with Tamar.
Yeah.
He doesn't want his firstborn child.
Because he knows that the firstborn child will be the heir. So he's like, I'm not having a child with her. Because that will be, here's the thing, if there's no heir, I get the property.
Very selfishly motivated.
So property goes back to that child in the name of that son. Yeah.
But his brother B was married.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question is, What if brother B was married? It looks like that then you could refuse, and it would go to the next brother. That's the way it looks. By the way, the kind of question you're asking is the kind of question that we see in Chazal, which is the rabbinic material, where they're asking these kind of questions. What if he's married and he doesn't want to become a polygamist? Yeah.
And so another good question, maybe not as prolific in that time period, but what if she doesn't want to marry him?
Yeah, if she does not want to marry, here's what's interesting. Here's what's interesting about the way that this reads, and the way you see it in Genesis, is that when a girl marries, she marries into the son's family.
Whole lineage.
So she becomes part of that family, to the point that she's not allowed to remarry. Go ahead, sorry.
If she gets divorced, she goes back to her father.
She gets divorced, she goes back to her family.
Yeah.
That's different.
But as a widow.
But as a widow, she stays in the family of her husband.
I guess that's the way it should be, since she would be heir to
So-
that family.
It's very interesting. So all of that we just discussed, is overlay for the book of Ruth. All that we just discussed is going to come into play for the book of Ruth. It's all part and parcel of the narrative, and explains a lot of things that are going on in the narrative. Okay? So come with us on Wednesday here, 11 o'clock. We're going to have some fun discussing the whole book of Ruth. It's a fascinating book. Much more in that book than what we normally see.
How long are you guys going to be here?
It'll be a couple hours. We're breaking for lunch in between. But we'll serve lunch at noon, so we'll start at 11, break for lunch, and then come back in the afternoon and have a little bit more discussion. It's a long book. It's 4 chapters. There's a lot there.
How late?
You can leave when you need to.
No, I was just wondering, because I get out of school at 4.
We're locking the doors, you have to stay.
Yeah, exactly. Once you're here, you have to stay. Yes. Go ahead.
Are you sure to read the other version of Ruth?
Well, actually, Ruth only has. You're thinking in terms of Esther.
Oh, Esther, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
That's two.
Yeah. I was just saying, whoa, there's another version. Yeah, you're thinking Esther. Yeah, the Earhart version. No, what he's talking about is that with Esther, we have the Greek text of Esther, several versions of the Greek text that are radically different from the Hebrew version. So it's like there was 2 different versions of the book, but very, very different. Parallel universes. Whereas with Ruth, and I will say this: the book of Ruth. We'll say this when we, Wednesday too. The book of Ruth, from a textual standpoint, is very, very solid. Very few textual variants in that book, so it's nice because it stayed quite solid. All right. Any other questions or comments about what we looked at? Yes.
You spoke of the Moabites and that they were unworthy, and that it was forever. What's the relationship between Israel and Jordan today?
Yeah, the relationship of Israel and Jordan today is very, very tense. If you go, I'll say it this way. Here's how to put it. If you go into Jordan today, if you fly into Jordan and your passport is stamped Jordanian, you're going to be looked at very, very. When you come to Israel, you're going to be looked at with suspicion, or vice versa. If you come to Jordan from Israel and you have Israel stamped to your passport, they're going to wonder why you're there, and you're going to be talked to a long time before they let you in.
I'm a tourist. I'm looking.
I'll put it this way: there's not a whole lot of trust there. Trust is very, very
Hard to come by.
very hard to come by there. Yeah, it's very, very thin. I have seen people at the Ben Gurion airport turned around on flights and just said, "We're not letting you in. You have to get back on the next flight." So,
I had a couple of friends who were going to go over on a missionary venture to Jordan, and they had been to Israel, and so they called ahead, and the people in Jordan said, "No, you've got an Israel stamp, you can't come. Sorry, we don't want you."
Yeah.
So 2 other people ended up going. So,
Yeah, both sides will question you heavily as to why you were there. There's not, there's just a lot of suspicion. And rightly so, in some respects. So they're just gonna question you. You're gonna detain you. You're not gonna get in quickly. Yes.
When we were sailing in the Mediterranean, going from Syria to Israel, they wouldn't say Israel, until we said our next port of entry was going to be in Cyprus. They wrote down India. They couldn't even write Israel.
Wow.
When we came into Israel, we know we was going to be touring in other places. Israel offers you a special temporary visa while you're in Israel, so you don't have to have a stamp in your passport saying Israel.
Right.
It cause you trouble going into some of these other countries.
Yeah, if you go into Arab countries, if you're going to Arab countries, and you're coming from an Arab country into Israel, again, you're going to be looked at very suspiciously. So they're going to detain you and question you heavily because why were you there? What were you doing there? Especially if you're, and hey, look, here's the word. Oh, we don't like the word, but they do it. It's called profile. And they profile. And so,
As well that we should be too.
so they just say, hey, look, if you're a certain age and a certain gender, if you're a male and you're young, you're high profile. So Janet, Janet would probably not be high profile. They're looking at her and say, okay, she's an older lady.
Yeah, but Bill on the other hand.
Huh?
Bill on the other hand.
Bill on the other hand, Bill on the other hand, yeah, he looks suspicious. But just telling you, this is how the world is operating now.
Dark hair, young, single.
Everybody in the world who's sane except for America.
Well, yeah.
Just, you know what?
I
I want to end with this. Just think about this. Just keep our military and our president and our leaders in your prayers,
Yes.
because they are dealing with so many world issues today, and God has the hand of the king in his heart. So it's not out of control. It looks helter skelter at times, and it looks out of control, but God is in control. So I just encourage us to pray for our leaders and say, God, please give them the wisdom they need to make decisions that are righteous. Just an encouragement. All right.